my life has been all but a dream. Breaking barriers in your life has to be your main goal. I was a very, very shy, nubile, and absolutely timid girl. The first picture that you see, I was 7 years old. And if it hadn't been for my hiatus going to the boarding school at 8 years, which changed my life completely because I came back with independence, a little voice. It was a timid voice, but it added to my experience about speaking up. It was my dream. I don't know if you remember that way back when TV had just started, there was a program called The Air Hostess. And it was like any other girl's dream to join the airline industry and, fly the high skies. But this did not come immediately. After 3 trials, lots of put downs. I came from a small town like Jammu where there was no exposure, no training. And the first time I was told, you have no poise. The second time I was told, we can't take you, you're too short, too fat, too whatever. The third time, a very incident that changed my life was because of the patriarchal structure which I grew up in. I was pushed into getting engaged. And the third time also that I got into Royal Jordanian, the airline where I flew the high skies, was I used my voice to actually break the engagement. In those days, it was a big thing. It was a lot of shame to the family if they said so. And the day that I was due to fly for Royal Jordanian to Amman was the same day my marriage was set. But can you imagine the choices that we had to take? Because this gentleman, I will still call him a gentleman, was not something that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with, simply because he was not going to be aligned with my goals of progression. And this gentleman actually married another girl on the same printed card. My name was slashed and another name was put in. He married and I was flying to the high skies. In between the time, as all women want, they want a marriage, they want kids, breaking the barriers. I had a short hiatus of wedding to someone that did not continue, my first wedding. Mutually we separated, finished, moved on. I tried my second hand at my second marriage. At 35, again, breaker for the mind. And at 38, I had my son. We have to really expand our skills and our mindset with thinking that this is possible. I can do it. And each one of you sitting here will come through various stages of life where you will say, how do I do this? But if you set a goal and you put your mind totally into it, there is nothing that you cannot achieve. Exciting part. People tell you at a certain age you can't do this. One morning my life changed. It was 2011. I was sitting with my husband, and also to let you know, when I married him, I told him one thing on the wedding night. I told him, whatever you're going to do, I'm going to do the same thing. And it was a promise between us. So in 2011, my husband was turning 50. I was almost 47. He told me, please come with me to climb Kilimanjaro. It's on my bucket list and I'd like you to come. And I said, I just thought, what will I do? What do we do for Kilimanjaro? Where is it? It's in Africa. I took the opportunity and I said yes. That yes changed my life. So when you look for opportunities, look for things that you can do. If you don't like it, never mind. Don't do it again. We trained for 4.5 months, reached the top, raised the Indian flag, and a new dream was set. The dream was to climb the 7 continents of the highest peaks of 7 continents. The dream was set, the goal was set for a person who was used to, as you can see, I still wear flashy polish, great clothes, always being authentic of who you are. Never forget who you are. You do not have to believe what other people tell you. Block that noise. The dream was set. We started climbing. This was the first time I saw Everest. Climbed Mount Elbrus in 2013. 2014, climbed Mount Vinson in Antarctica, became the 3rd and 4th Indians in the world to go to the frozen continent. In 2014, went to Mount Denali, Alaska, and we had to really take 60 kilos on our back and another 40 going through the sled. Everything had to be done yourself. For a person who was always in high heels, red lipstick during my flying days, and even educating, this was a tall order for me. It was tough. I had trained, I had disciplined myself. Something had to go wrong. I suffered a severe injury at 16,000 feet. Just like the sled where I was carrying my food stuff and my clothes, I was carried like precious cargo with skiers down to 11,000 feet. Came back to India, had a surgery of my right knee with the ACL, PCL, meniscus, all in tatters. Now, just like we have seasons for climbing. And I was due to climb, this was in June. July I had the operation, and the surgeon told me, Mrs. Behel, now you just go and water some plants, because for 1 year you're going to be out of sorts. And for me, who was driven internally to keep completing the summits, because this was a no-no, I could not complete the summit. Within 6 months, I went and climbed Mount Aconcagua, South America, with a big brace on my knee, 22,847 feet. Broke the barrier there and then. People used to see me with as if she's not going to even walk one step, but consistently, persistently, the mind power said you can do it. 2017 was my time to go to Everest. It was a year that we usually spend 2 months in the mountain, and on the 51st day, I was in Camp 3, which was 23,500 feet, and something went wrong, and I became very sick. My pulse shot up, my BP shot down, just everything went wrong. I had to be evacuated. And I had to come back. Now, failures teach you huge lessons. It was not something that I had hoped, but it was something I had to accept. So failures will teach you lessons. Failures will also teach you a lot about yourself. While I was going down in that helicopter, down to Lukla and to Kathmandu, the thoughts that were going into my mind is, next year, 2018, I'm going to come back and I am going to climb. Even God's going to climb with me. Because such was my Josh, such was my inner calling to say it's going to happen, but what am I going to do different? I trained 6 days a week. I used to cry in the gym. I used to seek help. Lots of people think if you don't ask for help, it's something that will make less of you. It's not the case. If you need help, ask. I trained well. I smiled more. I meditated. I had an attitude of gratitude all the time. So when I came in 2018, I was looking at the Everest Base Camp from this point called Kalapathar, and I looked at the Khumbu ice fall, and I said, I already know what this is all about. And I am so excited to be here. God help me, because I have really, really, really trained. I trained well. We usually train before we get into the Khumbu ice fall. Here, I was standing here wearing my down suit with Indian flags everywhere, and I was ready. Brick by brick, you make a conscious calling in your mind to say, this is possible. And your limited thinking becomes limitless when you start expanding your mind and saying, this is possible. It will only expand if you open your mind. Here at Camp 1, I stood smiling. I said, I'm not going to stop smiling, but I'm really ready for it. Climbing ladders. How many of you are Punjabis here? Because I'm a Punjabi. Okay, but you'll understand what I'm going to tell you. This is a story which is very funny. In 2017, I went with some Americans. So there was less of that apnapan, But in 2018, I had 2 Sherpas who did not understand Hindi so much, but they understood my body language. And every time these ladders came, because of my knee issue, I could not jump so much. So I used to be a little pensive that I don't want to fall inside. So I had this word, and you will laugh when I say it. I used to say, Syapa. So there were 32 ladders to cross and 32 ladders to come down. I must have done it like hundreds of times. So every time they came, I would mutter and say, Syapa, that I have to do this. But I used to do Gayatri Mantra as I was going. So by the end of, by the time I came back from Everest, there was just a few ladders, and by then these guys were attuned to my language. And I was standing and I was saying, oh, I've climbed Everest, now I have to just go back to this place. And they both said, ma'am, your Syapa has come. And so we had a laughing joke about that. So these ladders went deep into the crevices if you were not careful. My thought process when I reached the 4th camp was all of amazement that I made it this far. Now, Camp 4 is also called the South Col. The South Col is like a football field where if you're not tied to a rope, you can fly off, never be seen again. I was sitting in my camp, in my little tent, and I prayed, and I said to myself that all the barriers to thinking come from the mind. Now it was not a question of physical only. It was a question of expanding your mind, because if I was going to gravitate through the top, I would have to be more than what I was. What I like to say is our barriers to think are inbuilt within us. There are many times we give up. So if you live with your goals and you relentlessly pursuing them without time wasters, blocking the mind of people who are telling you, you can't do this, you can't do that, and wholly solely concentrating on the goal in mind, you can do anything, you can achieve anything, and age is never a barrier. Over here, there was a gentleman from a mountaineering institute who was trying to be funny, but it was not funny. And he had earlier met me in the base camp, and he mentioned to me, Mrs. Behel, did your husband allow you to come up? So I had to block that noise because I was already here and I had to just climb up. But I said, let me just also connect with him. So I said, so and so, mister. And I said, I'm sure your wife allowed it too. And we never saw each other again. We both summited and we have never met again. It's been 5 years. So sometimes you must be assertive to tell somebody that this is not something one should do. This is the last steps before you actually climb Everest. And we were the first ones, the first 7 people that left that Camp 4 to reach this point. It is a very emotional moment because, you know, after that point, there is no other way. The only way is to come back safe. I cried. I was so emotional that I had tears stricken down, which stayed with me for many weeks because they stick onto your skin and your skin shrivels like, I don't know, a shriveled up pumpkin. But it is a different life altogether. So I sat there and I prayed. I was so full of humility over there, thinking that we here on earth talk of so many things. We are this, we are that. But in the end, we are just humans with a little journey, and we have to make the best use of our potential by expanding our skills. When I set out to climb Everest, it was not that I was there to break a record. History was created when I became the oldest Indian woman to climb Everest at 53 years. We live a life by being authentic, by being real with ourselves. But there is nothing that you cannot do unless you put your mind wholly, solely into it. From my story, I can say, I am not just a flower that you can pluck for its beauty and let it die. I will always be wild. I will be always difficult to find and impossible to forget. Thank you.